My name is Sarah Smith. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is June 13th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
Okay, my full name is Ayana Elise Bailey Gaines. I was born February 19th, 2002. My pronouns are she, her, and what else was I supposed to say? Did I
Got
say
it. Okay, so tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
I love learning and I love making art. When I'm not making art, I love watching documentaries and video essays online about any and everything. I'm currently really obsessed with the Legend of Zelda series because it's just really beautiful, like the art style and the story. I love it. Um, I also really love cheerleading, gymnastics, and dance. I think that's probably one of my favorite forms of physical art. Um, and besides that, probably I like to bake sometimes. That's about it.
Okay, anything else about what you like to do or any hobbies or interests?
um, I like, I guess I just like to do anything that I can kind of make creative in a way. Like, I love to do my nails, I love to do my hair, I like to do makeup when I feel like taking the makeup off later. Yeah, any creative based thing, I love to do that.
Okay, so where did you grow up and where do you live now?
Okay, so I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it's an interesting place to grow up because I call it a watered down New York because it's like New York, but it has its own identity and it's very much like New York in the sense of it's a really big city, but when you live there for a long time, it just becomes like a small town because everybody knows everybody. You just know it like the back of your hand. And I lived there until I was like 14, I think, and then I moved to Georgia, which was not my ideal place to live because the South is not my favorite place. Um, but I stayed there for 5 years, and that's where I graduated high school. And then after I graduated high school in 2020, that's when I moved out here to Sacramento.
And why did you move to Sacramento?
So when I graduated from high school, that was when COVID began. So I really just kind of like all my emotions went blank, and I didn't really know what to do at that moment because no one knew what to do. And so my uncle had moved out to California 2 years prior. Um, and so he just was like, hey, you could come here and see if you like it. I don't know if you have any interest in California, but if you're down, and I was like, cool, because it just kind of was on a whim because, there's what else was going to happen, the world was shut down. So, yeah, I kind of moved here on a whim.
And so where in Georgia did you live?
So when I lived in Georgia, I lived about half an hour away from Atlanta in this little city called McDonough, and I I appreciated Georgia because it was nice to be surrounded by like Black culture, but I didn't really appreciate it too much outside of like my little nice bubble that I enjoyed because the South just has a very rich history that cannot be overlooked, even when like the good parts are good. But that's just my own personal opinion. Not to go on a tangent, but
Okay, so where do you currently attend college?
so currently I'm a recent graduate of American River College, and I will be transferring to UC Davis this fall. And yeah,
And what do you study?
I will be pursuing my bachelor's in studio art and hopefully getting a minor in art history or leaving with 2 degrees from Davis if it's possible. So yeah,
Are you excited to be transferring?
I am nervous because I didn't think that I would actually go to college. And now I'm like gonna go to like one of the most prestigious schools, I guess, in the country. So it's slowly but surely hitting me.
Are you going to continue living in Sacramento and then commute to Davis?
I will be living in Davis actually, because I got a full scholarship, so they're gonna pay for everything. So I'm like, okay, I'll live there for free.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
And when did you start at ARC?
I started at ARC in August of 2020, like immediately after high school.
Were you taking classes full time or part time or some mix?
I was full time all of my journey at ARC, so that was like 3 years I was there. Yeah, I was full time the whole time.
So, can you tell me about how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking? So, race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, ability, religion, and so on.
Okay, so I identify as a Black questioning woman. Um, I I was gonna say something else, but I my mind is blank.
There's religion.
Yeah, religion. I used to be I was raised Christian, but I am no longer I don't like to identify as Christian because I think that I am just not interested in like organized religions anymore because they make me uncomfortable. So I guess I just identify as more of like a spiritual person than an actual like Christian.
Is that something that you decided recently or fairly recently?
Yeah, when I left my school in Philadelphia, I went to a Christian middle school, and when I started high school in Georgia, I was still pretty Christian until about like the 11th grade when I started to do some like research on Christianity, and I just was like, this doesn't feel right. And ever since I was little, I was just kind of like doing what they asked me to do. I never was like, I always used to say when I get older, I'll be a real Christian because when I was little, I just felt like I'm just Christian because you guys are telling me to be Christian. And now that I'm an adult and I can kind of just be who I want to be, I am realizing that I am just not a Christian. So I'm just not interested.
Um, and then ability.
I am physically able-bodied, but I I am wondering if I am autistic, possibly, and also um, maybe like I can't remember the category of what ADHD is in. Um, like the functioning. What's it called?
Like neurodivergence? No.
No, like attention disorders, I guess. Um, I'm wondering if I may have it as well because my brother has ADHD and my mom always would say he used to have it when he was little, but now he doesn't have it. But I'm like, that's not how that works. So I'm like interested in seeing a doctor about that just to like confirm and maybe help me focus more.
And why are you thinking that maybe you're autistic?
um so I when I met my close friend, she is autistic, and when I met her, we like immediately clicked, and we just were like, wow, we are like the exact same person. So one day, I went over her house, and she was showing me her collection of these amiibo cards for her game, and I immediately was like, oh, they messed up. I got to organize them, color code it and everything. And she just was looking at me like, that's not like, sure, people do that, but like people don't really do that. And so she just had asked me like, we're really similar. Have you ever wondered if you're maybe autistic? And I just was like, no, but it makes a lot of sense if I am, because when I was younger, I was pretty like nonverbal, borderline mute until maybe like the third grade, but no one really questioned it or cared because everybody was like, oh, she's just quiet. So I didn't know that that was a thing until like maybe like last year. So now I'm like, well, now that I'm an adult and I don't have to rely on anyone to do anything, I'll probably check that out.
Okay, I think this is a question we'll return to.
Mm-hmm.
But you said that you're questioning with regard to your sexual orientation. What does that mean?
So for me, I am questioning my orientation because I guess I just may be in that stage of life where I'm questioning everything because, I just grew up Christian and I did everything they asked me to do. And now I have this deep wonder of like, I don't really know what I want to do for myself and like who I am, because I like boys because they told me this you're supposed to like boys. I didn't wear anything bad because they told me don't do that. And so now that I don't want to be a Christian anymore, I'm like, well, all those times when I had feelings for like a girl, and I just would be like, well, maybe I just really like her as a friend. Maybe I'm just like revisiting like every memory. Like, was that? I don't. I just. It's all like a mess in my head because I'm really questioning like I'm unsure of how I know if I actually really like someone or if I really like them as a friend. It's just I just keep saying it's a really big question mark in my head right now. So that's
How do you think you're going to figure it out? I know that's a hard question.
I'm like wondering it because I am trying to get into dating women because it's not like I have never liked a woman before. It's just I never pursued it because I felt like I'm not supposed to do that. And now that I can do essentially whatever I want to do, I'm trying to like get out of that discomfort of being like, if I actually pursue someone that I like, God will be mad at me, or I don't know, my pastor at school will be disappointed or something. And I'm just trying to like, I guess, take that next step of like, okay, well, when you like someone, what do? You like go on a date or something. So I think maybe that'll be my next steps in figuring that out.
Are you out as questioning to friends and family?
Uh, to my friends, for the most part. For my family, I think it's like an unspoken, like, I just understand. I'm grateful that my family, they never really, um, how do I say it? Like, they never had those strict expectations that I strictly date boys. It was mostly my authoritative figures at school that they just were so active in my life that it almost felt like all my teachers and the staff at my school were my other parents. So my actual parents, like at home, they just were like, well, we don't really care. Um, Even like now, my dad is like, well, I always thought that you would probably date a girl when you're older, but it's kind of like a weird situation there.
So do you think if you, as you're figuring things out, if you came out to them, would they be supportive?
I'm sure that my mom would maybe be more supportive than my dad. Only because my dad is, he just has a lot of traditional values that he still kind of adheres to. And I know, like, he wants, like, grandkids and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like my dad would be a little bit more, like, kind of like she'll grow out of it. But my mom, I'm like pretty sure that my mom would be like, I don't care.
And do you think religion shapes how your dad might respond?
um, Definitely, because even though my dad is like, he tries to kind of understand the world as I see it. He is very like, I don't like to say that people are set in their ways, but he has shown that he is pretty set in his ways, and he is very much, even though he doesn't outright say it, he might say like, I don't care about what other people are doing, but then he does care. Um, he will still expect me to kind of, be a lady, come home with a decent guy, get married one day. I'm just like, I don't know if that's gonna happen, Dad. So I think definitely him being a Muslim, he definitely expects those things.
And you're questioning that stuff, like even whether or not you would have kids.
Yeah, because I don't know. I'm having a really big reflection period right now where I just am looking at like, wow, like I'm 21 and I have a long way to go, but I feel a little lost right now because the journey that I have come has been what, like 90% shapen by something that I don't really believe in anymore. So it kind of makes me feel like I got all these open ends that I'm like, I don't know how to close them right now. I don't know if I should close them right now because I'm only like, I'm a baby adult. So yeah, it's a big question mark.
This might be a hard question to answer since you're still figuring out whether or not you're autistic, but um, well, first, I guess, are you considering pursuing a diagnosis or just figuring it out for yourself?
I would like to. Uh, well, I guess that is kind of a hard question to ask because I did talk about this with my friend, because we had like a really good conversation about how she is almost like envious that I'm potentially autistic and I didn't grow up in an environment where everyone knew I was autistic because then no one kind of treated me too differently. They only would like treat me different because they're like, oh, she's quiet, she's being weird right now. But it was never that because I have autism. And so now she's like, I think about like, if I did tell people that I was autistic, like, would they start treating me like I can't do the same things that I've been doing my whole life, Like, because my friend, she went to like an autistic school or something where they taught her how to be normal. And I don't know, I just feel like that's strange to me because it's like if I went through regular school potentially having autism, like of course I had many moments that were very socially awkward and very like, had I known that potentially autistic, those moments would have made so much more sense. But I don't feel like, I should have been in an environment where people are just telling me like, no, like don't have that moment happen at all. Because I feel like every moment that happens in my life happens for a reason. So I would hate to stop something from happening because people feel like oh, she's different. I guess, yeah, I would not like to feel othered, but for my own sake, like, I guess it just would kind of make me feel better about my past, and especially elementary school. That was probably the hardest because, nobody knows how to deal with a child when they just don't want to talk. Like, I don't have anything to say, I don't want to speak. And I guess it just would make me feel like some sort of closure, I guess. But it does kind of worry me. Like, even I did bring out me potentially being autistic to my uncle, and he immediately was just like, no, like, that you're not autistic, because autistic people, they just don't have any emotions. And I'm like, I don't think that that's true. And so, like, that little experience in itself kind of was like, well, if I brought it up to my mom, like, what would she say? Or even my dad. So I feel like if I did pursue a diagnosis, I would probably just keep it to myself, maybe.
Or just figure it out as you go, too, right?
Yeah.
Feel like who's safe, right?
Yeah, because I just would really hate to feel othered, because I don't like that my friend feels that way sometimes, like when she has those moments of like, oh no, I can't do that because the people at school told me I can't do that. And I'm like, who cares about the people at school? Just do it, Like, I feel like that's unfortunate that there's so many people that have these diagnoses, and they weren't able to reach their own full potential or feel like proud of themselves in like a difficult moment because someone told them no, or someone told them like they weren't smart enough to do it. Because it's what I've learned is like, it doesn't matter if you're like smart or whatever. It's like everyone figures out their own way to like solve their problem or whatever they need to do. And I just would hate for that to be taken away from me.
Yeah, there's a stereotype, right, of autistic people that is prevalent in pop culture. So a lot of people, when they think of what it means to be autistic, they think of this sort of one stereotype, and that stereotype, like you said, is somebody who's like cold, right, who doesn't show emotion, which is very far from the truth.
Yeah.
But it's also a stereotype that's like based on somebody assigned male at birth, somebody who's white, right, and somebody who has like, I mean, there are other traits there, but I think the sort of the basic thing is somebody assigned male at birth, somebody who is white, somebody who's like super analytical and logical, so less creative, right?
Yeah.
And has a hard time showing emotion, which makes it hard for people who don't share those traits, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm doing too much talking.
I don't know, like if I was like confirmed that I'm autistic, I just feel like a lot of my life would be like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, because I have had so many moments where I just like, it's like I just shut down. It's like there's nothing happening up here, can't speak to you. And like, I'm not one of those people that's always like thinking incredibly logically, or because my brain is just like, it's always in creative mode. That's why I love to create, and I figure out creative solutions to things. And I really like that about myself. Like, I'm very resourceful. And yeah, when I met my friend, she just was like, you're so independent and you do all these cool things. And I'm like, I'm just living. And I'm like, it sucks because now I'm like, how do you teach people these life skills that you learn from living your life, when it's like you just grow up being kind of like forced to be dumbed down, and like you can do so much more. And I would not like that to happen for me.
Do you think that potentially being autistic has maybe influenced you to question your sexual orientation, or has it influenced you to question things in general at all?
Definitely. It makes me think. I overthink, but I also think about like how are other people like viewing me, and am I like, I often think, am I going about, like, if I'm pursuing a relationship, am I going about it wrong? I'm like really like hyper analyzing every little thing, and I try not to um what's the term, like, I think it's called like mirroring or like parroting something. Like I copy things a lot. So when I was younger, I didn't really have a lot of friends. I just watched a lot of TV shows. And so I would kind of like copy what I saw on TV shows and do it in real life. And it never worked out because TV shows are not real life, and it was always awkward. And so now, as I am an adult and I'm trying to do a lot of unlearning, I'm realizing, like, or I don't know if I'm realizing, but I'm questioning. I'm like, am I still doing that? Like, am I being like, I don't know how to just have this be a natural moment, so I'm gonna go back to what I know and just like copy something, and maybe something good will happen. And I don't know how to not do that because it's all I've ever done. But then this is where like my overthinking comes in, because I'm just like, I don't know how to have any natural moments. I don't know what to do. And the same thing goes for friendships. Because when I was younger, I didn't really have too many friends that I actually made. You know, like it was more so people just kept talking to me and I kept listening because I didn't talk back. And so they just like, okay, you're my friend now. And I just was like, all right. And so I like just made my first couple of friends where I'm like, okay, like I really value this relationship, but I'm so, I have this like new set of anxiety of like, what if like this just isn't real? Like, am I actually here? What's happening? And then I get like nervous that the friendship might not go on very long, because I'm just like realizing like, wow, I've never had like a friend that I've had like a real like deep connection with, and I've never had a friend where I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're doing today, you know, because it's like I never cared before. um so I'm like, I'm always like constantly panicking a little bit that I might not actually like have any friends, but I'm like, I will not acknowledge those thoughts because I'm having a good time right now. So I'm like, I'm everything's just a question. Everything's a big question.
Can you talk some about your class status and how you grew up and what your class status is now?
Yes. So as of right now, this feels so foreign to even say this, but I think that I'm like lower middle class now. And I just am like, I'm like, this is luxury. Because when I was little, I grew up and we were poor when I was little. Um, like it feels so weird to be like, oh, I'm like middle class now. This is this is new. So yeah.
Why do you think you're lower middle class now?
Um, just because there's like actual money to like afford things, you know, like if I need to buy something, I can. And now it's, for me, it's more so focused on like, okay, now that you have some money, how do you manage it? Um, because since I grew up poor, I'm very much in like, I am fine with not having any money. I'll spend it all right now, and that's not good. Um, so yeah, it's definitely like new, and also because when I moved in with my uncle, I guess he's kind of like a guardian right now. Well, he was, because you know I was 18 when I came here, and it just was like new to have like someone who actually could afford things, kind of taking care of stuff. Like I didn't have to worry about rent or none of that. So it was very Very weird. Still feels weird.
Um, in terms of like, what does it mean to be middle class? You can afford stuff. Like, what kind of stuff can you afford?
Like, we can afford food. We can afford, well, like nicer food. Just like we can go to the store and get like healthier like fruit options, or we don't have to get like the chicken that looks a little weird because it's cheaper, or we can actually like buy nicer fruits and vegetables. Um, I think it's like, for me, it's like I can afford like if my clothes ripped or something, or my book bag fell apart, I could just purchase a new one instead of having to like mend it and sew it up and fix it. Because before, when I was little, it just was like, well, that's your only pair of pants. You gotta fix it. So it feels like it's almost a little overwhelming because, like, when I was little, I didn't have a lot of things. It's like I just had to keep fixing them. So now that I have a lot of stuff, I'm like, oh, I have to do so much laundry because there's so many clothes, or it's like there's so many dishes to clean because there's like many dishes here, not just like paper plates I could throw away. So, and also like learning how to use a dishwasher. That was interesting. I definitely
It's
learned.
nice, right?
It's very nice. It's also nicer when you learn that dishwashers have their own soap and not the soap for the dishes because they don't have to clean up.
So you said your family struggled financially when you were younger.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate some?
So when I was younger, my mom had me when she was young. So I think she was my age when she had me. I think she was 21 or maybe 22, and she had my brother when she was 18. So she had two kids, and her and my dad were separated. So she started to do hair because back in the 90s and like the early 2000s, that was like a really like fast way to like make a lot of money, and it still is. It still can be. Um, and so that's kind of how my mom made a lot of her money. She still does hair now, but she's not trying to do that as much because the money's not the same. And having two children and only doing hair is not very sustainable. And my dad, he was just kind of like, he was just not there. And so my mom would be working a lot, and it would mostly just be me and my grandmother and my two younger cousins. And so we just kind of we would like shuffle around like our family's houses. Like if my mom didn't have food or we didn't have enough food for everyone, I would go to my great aunt's house and we would eat dinner there. And we had a very like communal environment. Like it very much was like it takes a village to raise all the kids. And yeah, I feel like that's where I got a lot of my resourcefulness from because like when nobody had any food and there was no way to get to like my aunt's house, we would be eating like oatmeal for like 2 weeks, or just like a lot of cereal, a lot of bagels, just like whatever's cheap and you could get it from the corner store or something. Um, but I will give my mom props because a lot of the money she made, she put it into me going to a private school because the schools around me just were not very good. Um, but you know, it was kind of like the pros and cons. It's like I go to this really nice school, and that's where I like ate a lot of my food for lunchtime, and I would take some food home sometimes. But then it's like when I go home, it's like I don't have that much stuff. It's like my mom, she put a lot of effort into like making sure that we were comfortable and we had like the latest toys. but not always like the latest clothes or something. It was kind of like we were comfortable in other areas, but not a lot of other areas. And I think also just growing up in Philly was like, just like, like when you grow up in an urban area, you don't get as much attention as if you were to live somewhere else in the city. Like if we lived in the suburbs, like there would be some days where our power would go out in the summertime because maybe the grid near us was just needed tending to, or we would have blackouts in the wintertime because sometimes our power lines would be old and they would ice over or something. And it just was like just stupid stuff that was very annoying. um, but yeah, it's like I look back on my childhood because my mom, she really, really tried her hardest, and I had a fun time with my brother, and I have a lot of fond memories, even though like we did a lot of things that were like it was almost like naked and afraid, just like survival of the fittest. But I feel like um, I'm just happy that my family, like, we were very, like, we're always cracking jokes because it's like, wow, the power's really out. It's been out for like a week now. It's crazy.
Were you mainly in a low income community?
Yeah. Um, Up until maybe like my 11th grade year of high school, when I was in Georgia, that was probably like my first like little taste of not being super poor because my mom finally got a luxury apartment. And I just was like, because we had one of those microwaves that was like on the wall, and I just was like, ooh, this is so fancy. And we had like a little kitchen island, and I was like, ah, this is like. I used to do this thing when I would come home. I'd be like, MTV, welcome to my crib, because I just was like, wow, this is so nice. And then after that, that's when I moved out here, and I just was like, wow, this is even nicer.
Did you grow up in Philadelphia and then in Georgia? Was your community mainly Black?
Yeah, so in Philly, it was Philadelphia is a very mixed, like it's just a very large like mixing of people from everywhere. But I did have a lot of like Black friends, but I also had like Vietnamese friends and um, a lot of friends from India, and there's a very big like Portuguese and like Southeast Asian community there. And I really appreciated that. But then when I moved to the South, it was like almost exclusively like Black and Mexican people. And I thought that that was pretty cool because a lot of the people that I met were from like Mexico, Honduras, and Venezuela, I think. Just like those different countries down there. And I thought that that was pretty cool. But moving to Georgia was like my first experience just having like this different kind of Blackness. It's like the Blackness in different places is just really different. So me being from up north and going down there, I just was like, wow, I'm in like a whole other world. I was like, you guys grew up with like crazy stuff and just like eating completely different like things that I ate, especially um, as my mother's side of the family is from the Caribbean, so it was like a whole other what do you call it, like a culture shock. It was pretty cool though.
Did you feel like you fit in, or did you have a hard time adapting? Or was it a combination?
It was definitely a combination of both because it's like, yeah, I'm Black, but I'm not Southern, so I'm like You know, I got people being like, yeah, my mom's making pork chops for dinner. And I'm like, I don't eat pork. Or I got like, you know, there was this one girl I met and she was like, you never sucked a honeysuckle bush? I was like, I don't even know what a honeysuckle bush is. And just like, you know, like the language, and I would often like misinterpret some people's like the things that they would say, especially if I met someone from Florida, because they have a very thick accent, as a lot of black people in Florida are Haitian immigrants. So it's like they have this very like deep mix of like Southern Creole, and it's like I don't know what you're saying. I'm sorry, but I don't know. It's like I felt at home, but I also felt kind of out of place. Only because I felt mostly out of place because when you are outside of your community bubble in the South, it's like you're just in the wilderness. Mostly, you know, because of like the racial stuff there. The racial stuff in the South is so much different than up north. It's like back home, I feel like people are racist, but they keep it more to themselves because they're just like, I feel like back home, it's like people are more interested in trying to put some wealth back into the community because we all were just kind of like struggling. So it just was like, who cares what you look like? But in Georgia, it was more so like, we just don't want you here. And I just was like, whoa, this is a lot. And I that's why I just have such mixed feelings about Georgia because I really miss feeling so surrounded by like black people, and especially you know, I grew up like pretty poor and I didn't really have too many examples of like black people achieving like, you know, graduating from college and owning businesses and just kind of like the whole black excellence thing. So that culture is very rich in the South, but living there is really like, it's truly a double-ended sword for me because it's like once you leave that like that comfortability, it's like the uncomfort is just like unbearable for me, and I don't think I would ever move back there, honestly.
Did you have any specific experiences when you were in Georgia? People being explicitly racist?
I had a couple of experiences that definitely made me a little bit uncomfortable, and I definitely, it's like I am not used to racial things happening to me because I'm just so used to growing up around people that I'm like racism is not even like the first thing that happens in my mind when I have like a weird encounter with someone. But you know, when I'm like in middle of nowhere Georgia and I got like these white folks staring at me and I'm just like, okay, I didn't do anything, nothing else happened. It's almost like process of elimination. Like when we first moved down there, because my mom, we drove down there with my siblings and we stopped at some gas station. So uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. It's like I never felt so many eyes just like following us in the store. That was like my my first encounter that I had. And the other one that I had that really like bothered me was I was out with my little friend group. It was me and my black friend and my two mixed friends, and we were getting some smoothies and we parked next to this Tesla, and this was when Teslas were still kind of like new, and we were like, oh, this car is so nice, like look at it, it's so cool. And it's just like, you know, like when you can feel someone staring at you sometimes, I just felt like this stare, and I looked over to the window of the smoothie shop, and it was just this table of these white girls, and they just were eyeing us down, just like I've never had someone look at me so like so meanly. I just was so uncomfortable. And so, you know, I didn't want to think anything of it. So I was like, oh, maybe this is their car. And they were like, why are they all up on our car? Which I would have been like, okay, my bad. But so they immediately left as we came in, and they like got into like a Honda, and I was like, okay, well, what was that about? And that experience just really stuck with me because like I just never had anyone look at me so like uh, I just I wish I could delete that memory because I'm just like you guys are jerks.
So how was the transition to Sacramento for you in terms of like the racial dynamics from Georgia to Sacramento?
It's definitely interesting. I've never been around like so many white people before, and it's now it's almost like I'm like truly I feel very foreign because I am like I've never really had any white friends before. And I never really interacted with a lot of white people before. So it was a little bit difficult for me to kind of understand like the things that they would say. Because I feel like in my experience, I've met a lot of like almost like passive aggressive white people that, and I'm just not used to that because like I don't want to make like this generalization that people of color are just more direct, but it's like I never kind of dealt with like I don't know like people that don't actually want to say what they're trying to say, so it would always like throw me off, and I feel like I went through this little period of like miscommunications, but then I was like, okay, let me just like wait a moment and let people explain themselves because maybe I'm just like jumping the gun here, and it's also like kind of different like as far as like dating and like relationships goes, it's really interesting for me because like in Philadelphia in Georgia, I never even like had to like I don't want to sound like this, but I never really had to like try when it came to dating because you know it just was like this is just how I look. People are interested. I may or may not be interested, but out here it's just like in my experience, I have found that like I am just not what people are looking for, and I think that that's really interesting because I've never been in that scenario before. Because I feel like maybe I just need to broaden my horizons here, but in my experience, I just have found that like a lot of people kind of like are a little bit weird with me, especially if they are not black. Because I've never dated a white person before, but when they do approach me with hopes of dating, it's very strange sometimes. Like, because I've had some people just assume that I'm like African, and I'm like, I'm not. I was born here. I'm not. And it's just like I just have never had so many kind of like awkward encounters when it comes to dating, and I just am like it's very different like in that regard. Um, so yeah, I guess like the transition from Georgia to California is very it's just it took some adjusting to understand like different people's interactions, especially because I will say the vibe in California. Let me be more specific than just a vibe, but just kind of like people's demeanor in regards to kind of how they live their everyday life in California is much different than how it is in Philadelphia, because you know the northeast of this country is just a very like it's just very city and busy, and when I come out here everyone's just so kind of like mellow, and it's like you know I'm people like to decompress here, and I'm just like that's not a thing back home, you just keep going. So it definitely took me some time to adjust to kind of the speed here. I described Sacramento when I moved here as a place where you can really just go at any pace that you feel is best for yourself. because it's very I don't know, it's like it's slow, but it's only slow if you need it to be slow. That's kind of how it felt to me. So
So you said at some point that you didn't think you were going to go to college.
yeah,
Why was that?
just because of where I grew up in Philly, I there weren't too many people around me that went to college, especially not college that was too far away from home. Like at best, I would see people go to maybe like Baltimore or um, the furthest maybe being like Florida. But even then, it's like that's like a straight shot. Like you can just go down and back up to Florida to Pennsylvania. So for some people, it's like not too far. Um, but I didn't really think that I would go to college because my mom didn't go to college and my dad didn't go to college. My dad just did a whole bunch of trade schooling, and my mom, cosmetology is a trade school, isn't it? Yeah, my mom got her cosmetology license, and I don't know. I just kind of thought when I was little, I would just like grow up and I don't know, get a job and have kids and get married, and that'll be my life. Just because that's what was taught to me at my school. I did at some point think I was going to go to a Christian university and maybe like I don't know, like try to work in a church or something, but that did not happen. I don't think that's going to happen.
So that's what was taught to you at school? So you went to a private high school in Georgia, or was that a public school?
In Georgia is where I went to my first public school. I went to a private Christian school from first grade up until seventh grade.
Okay.
And then, yeah, when I moved to Georgia, I was there for 5 years, and that was eighth grade up until I graduated from high school.
And nobody at your high school in Georgia led you to believe that you should go to college?
I didn't really, I had like a whole time when I was in Georgia where I just was, I kind of went nonverbal again. Because I didn't really want to move to Georgia, and so it kind of like made me like kind of go back into my shell. So all of eighth grade, I really don't remember it because I didn't really talk, and I just kind of shut that down. And kind of the same with ninth grade, and then 10th grade, I was kind of just like only focused on boys. And then 11th grade is when I finally was like, oh, like I need to pay attention in school and I need to like do something. Because high school up until 11th grade for me was just like, I just go here because I have to. I don't really want to be here. I don't care. Like, even though I really do love school, but I just wasn't really happy to be in Georgia. And I can't remember what exactly happened in 11th grade, but I think that I saw just like this group at my school. I think they were called like the Eagle Scholars or something like that. And I just look at them with like admiration. I was like, wow, they just are like so smart and like it's like my mom is proud of me for everything that I do. Like she always told me like just don't get pregnant in high school. Just don't be like me. As long as you don't do that, you're great. But I don't know, when I was in 11th grade, I think I had like a counselor at the beginning of the year. She was like, your senior year doesn't matter. This is the year that matters. And I was like, I guess I should try. And so in 11th grade, that's kind of when I like finally flipped my brain on and I was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do for school, but I know that I really like art. I've always done art. So in 11th grade, I said that I was going to try and go to the I can't remember what the full name of the school is. It's called SCAD. It's like the big art.
Savannah College
of
Art and Design.
Yeah, that school. I didn't really want to go there, but like I said, like okay, well if I'm good at art, I'm gonna go to the school because they're good at art. And I tried. I really, really, really tried with my SAT scores, but that that school wanted like a 1600 or something. And the SAT is not my friend. I did awful on it, and I'm so glad I don't have to take it again. So like 11th grade, I think my counselor was the reason why I finally was like, okay, I can go to college, but what school do I want to go to? Because, you know, my parents, they don't know anything about college. So, you know, and I was also surrounded by all these other Black students, and their parents went to school and they went to all these HBCUs. And I'm like, okay, what's the HBCU? Why does it matter if I go to one? What makes it different? Because I didn't grow up with like all this Black culture and stuff. So I just was like, should I go to an HBCU? Does it matter? What's PWI? I don't know any of these terms. And so 11th grade, I was just like looking at all these schools, and I just was like, I just told myself, hey, I'm just going to apply somewhere, and whoever takes me, that's where I'm going to go. And then when I got to my senior year, it was going great until COVID, and then I lost all steam, all motivation. I just was like, I don't want to do anything anymore because it just was like, we all know how COVID was. It just was very depressing, and I just kind of gave up. And so when my uncle was telling me, hey, I don't know if you have any interest in being in California, but there's a school, it's called UC Davis, really good school. If you want to look at it, we can go look at it or whatever. And I was like, okay. Because I just was like so defeated by 2020 that I just was like, I'll do anything if it'll make me feel happy. So now I live in California.
Can you tell me a little about your educational journey from high school to the present?
So kind of like how did I do in school?
Um,
Or like what was
yeah, how did you do in school? Where did you find community? Did you experience any issues, problems in school? Whatever occurs to you, basically. I know it's a very broad one.
So when I moved to Georgia, I kind of this is probably another indicator that I probably am autistic. So when I moved to Georgia, I kind of in my brain restarted my life, and so my brain kind of took me back to when I was in elementary school, and I kind of was like mute again for most of 8th grade. So I didn't really talk to too many people. I did okay in school, and well, I didn't really do okay in school because when I was in 8th grade, that was the first time that I had ever failed math. Just because I just was so unhappy and I didn't want to be there. Um, and I didn't really find any community in 8th grade. It just was kind of like I went there every day, and I was always late because I was like, I don't want to be here. And I would just go home and like walk around and just be like, I hate 8th grade. So then when I started high school in 9th grade, I was still kind of the same, but I told myself like, okay, I'm in high school now. I gotta try. Let me try to at least like make some friends or something, so it's not like miserable. But it just was really hard because I was trying to like force myself to be extroverted, and I'm not. You know, I was trying to like force myself to seem like I was fun, and I just would be like, I would kind of like do story times on my Snapchat to try and like show people like, hey, I can be fun too. No, dang well, I was just like, people in school used to call me Grandma Ayana because I just was like, I don't know, I would act like an old lady sometimes. Like, I didn't like to do anything that was like typical fun. Like, I like to crochet and I like to do Zumba classes on YouTube. So I really struggled with making friends in high school just because I didn't know anyone that kind of was on my same page of like, I kind of like was an adult before I was like a child. So when I got to high school, I was very like mature in other ways that I guess, people just were like, that's boring. Like, why do you play crossword puzzles in your spare time? And so I tried to care about school, but I really didn't because I just was like, who cares? The only thing that I cared about in school was art and my band class. I previously had never played an instrument before, but there was a mix up on my schedule, and somehow I got put in band class, and I didn't know how to speak up for myself at the time. So I just was like, well, I guess I'm in band now. And I'm so happy that that happened because I love band class. It was so fun. Like, I just would play with drums and like a big xylophone for an hour, and it was great. All the other classes were just meh, didn't really care. Science was fun sometimes because I do enjoy science, but biology is not fun. And then when 10th grade rolled around, I had made like some friends, but not too many because that is when I was probably like the most like exploring like relationships and just like messing with boys and stuff. And I really wish that I had it, but I learned a lot of things about myself. Because when I was in high school, my mom was working a lot, so she wasn't home a lot. So I basically had like a 3-bedroom apartment to myself for a lot of the time. And so it just would be like me, random people, and just hanging out. And I still was kind of like meh about school. I started taking French, and that kind of got me like more into like the school part. I feel like I just was more comfortable learning at home. Like, at school, I felt like so much pressure to like, oh, I gotta be fun. I gotta talk to people, and I gotta like I have to like make the day interesting for myself. Because then when I would go home, I would have fun doing my work. I would just do my homework. I would look up videos and like watch like crash course videos on YouTube because I like to learn, but learning at school was exhausting because like I could never really focus on it. I just had to like I was just more so focused on like the social aspect of high school, especially because like I was consuming so much like high school content on like YouTube and just like I think this was when Stranger Things was coming out and like that was in high school. And I talked about it earlier, but I was mimicking what I was seeing, and like whether I was like reading it or watching it, I still was like trying to mimic like, okay, maybe this will help me make more friends or have better interactions with people because I just never really talked to anyone. I just would stay to myself for the most part, and people would talk to me. And in 10th grade, I was still doing really well in art, and that's kind of when I decided to pursue. My school district in Georgia had like a fine arts pathway, or they had like different pathways for the students. Like if you were into science, they had like the STEM pathway, and then they had like a one that was specifically for people who wanted to follow the steps of becoming like a doctor. And then they had like the fine arts pathway. So my art teacher pulled me aside and she was like, hey, you're doing really good in my class. Would you like to be a part of the National Art Honor Society? And I was like, okay. And so that just that was a lot of community service, and I had to work on like developing ideas for like the art club and all that stuff. And all of this helped me get my fine arts diploma seal. It basically just showed that I completed the fine arts pathway in high school. And I guess it looks good on your high school transcript or something. And so that is when I was like, okay, I'm gonna take art more seriously because I had been drawing since I was like in kindergarten. Like I love to make art, and I was like when my art teacher was like, you're really good, like you're natural, you should try. And I was like, okay. So I started focusing more on my art, and I think the summer of 10th grade is when I was like, okay, I'm done with boys. They waste my time and I don't really like them. And so when I started 11th grade, that's when I think like at the beginning of the year they had like a little um it wasn't an assembly, but the head counselor came into the classroom of the 11th grade students, and she was like, okay, you guys, like this year really matters. Try your best. Your state test scores for this year, like the colleges are really going to be looking at these. And so I basically was like panicking a little bit because I was like, I'm barely passing by. Like, I think my GPA was like a 2.5 or something like that. Just very average everything. And so that year, the beginning of the year, when my counselor was like, you really gotta like try, that is kind of when I had like a change of heart and I was like, okay, I don't care about boys. And I started to kind of like silently observe all of my peers, especially the ones who were like taking these more noticeable leadership or student leadership things, you know, like the class president and like prom committee and all that stuff. I started to just kind of observe them more because I was like, I kind of want to do that. Like, I kind of want to be more involved in school stuff because up until that point, I just was trying to like play adult, like kind of, because like I said, like I was an adult before I was a child. So when I started high school, I guess I just was thinking like, okay, well, I have to get a boyfriend because that's just what happens in high school. And like all of my boyfriends in high school, I honestly was probably scaring them because I was probably like, so like what would we do if I had a baby? Like were we gonna get a job? And I just when I look back on it, I'm just like, I wish I could just like snatch myself from the shoulders and be like, no, stop it. And so yeah, 11th grade was kind of like my big turning point where I just was like, okay, I want to be more serious about school. And so I really, I was looking at all of the like the top percentile of my senior class, and I just was like looking at how they would participate in school, how they would do their homework, and what they did to study and stuff. And I tried to apply it more to myself. And I honestly, I was really proud of myself 11th grade because I did really well in chemistry, and I still like flex that to this day. Like I had a 97 in chemistry until like one of the last tests we took, which I absolutely bombed it, and I passed chemistry with like an 84, maybe 83. It really dropped my grade down very low. I was absolutely devastated, but I was still very happy because um, I was like one of the only people to pass chemistry, so I was just really proud of that. And the other thing that happened that kind of like made me be like, okay, I need to get my life together. In 10th grade, I failed math again, and I was like, no, this can't happen to me. It was really hard. I took this experimental math class called analytical geometry, and I did very bad in that class. And I think that year I also failed my state testing, so I had to take it again the next year. And I just was like, I need to do better because I don't want to be in summer school, and I definitely don't want to be a super senior because nobody ever lets you forget that. And so 11th grade, I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna get my life together. And it was going good for most of the year until like maybe like November, because then we were having like personal like housing insecurities and stuff that really was like getting in the way of school as far as like my comfortability was.
Were you homeless?
Yeah, that's when the end of 11th grade, we got evicted from our apartment, and so we just were like, I was trying to just when I was starting to feel like, like a teenager, and I'm like, oh, I'm young, I'm gonna do teenage thing. I got pulled back into like this like adult position where I had to like figure out like, okay, am I gonna like take a break? Am I gonna pause high school and like get a job and try to help here, or like what's gonna happen? And I was nervous that I was gonna have to move back home to Philly, and I just was like, I don't want this to happen. So, but my mom was just like, nope, don't worry about that. Just focus on school. So I was like,
Where did you live after you got evicted?
Um, so me and my mom, we were just like kind of unsure where to go. We were gonna go to a hotel, but I told the person that I was like the closest with, like as my friend, I told her what happened, and she immediately was like, "You can live with us." Mm. And in hindsight, it wasn't a good thing to live with them because it was her initiating it. So I thought that her mom had agreed, but her mom found out when we came to her house and was like, "Can we stay?" And she was like, "Okay, sure." And so, yeah, that situation did not end well. But throughout all of that, I just was like, school was kind of like my escape, and I kind of like actually like fell in love with being at school, and I was closer to school after we got evicted because where we lived, it was only like a 5-minute walk to the school. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to be at school on time. And like throughout all of high school, I also just kind of had like these adult responsibilities of like taking care of the house, and also I was basically like taking care of my sister a lot because my mom was always at work. So I had to take my sister from school. I had to take my sister to school, and I had to pick her up from school or daycare, wherever she was. And so I just was like, I don't know. I feel like when we got evicted and I had already kind of like committed to being a better student, I just was like, I just kind of got like tunnel vision. I was like, okay, I need to make this year a good year academically, even though my life at home is garbage. So I made some of the best art that I've ever made in 11th grade, and one of my favorite pieces that I made, like I'm still really proud of it. Um, I did really well in chemistry.
Wait, what was the piece that you made?
Oh, I made this piece. I called it Golden Years because it had different angles of my hands, and I drew my hands at different stages of my life. Like I drew my hands from when I was a baby and my hand in the moment of me drawing it, and then I kind of like aged my hand older and older. And so I had like the baby hands, and then I had my hand holding the pencil to kind of represent me in that moment. And then I had I made my hand holding a champagne glass, and then my other hand kind of like having a ring on it to kind of symbolize like where my future could grow. Like I kind of like did the hand holding the pencil to kind of symbolize like I'm kind of illustrating where my life will take me, even though I really hate it right now. And I kind of did like a collage portion to it. I don't remember what exactly the newspaper piece that I put on there says. I think it says like only time will tell or something like that. And that's like one of my favorite pieces ever because I just was like, oh, that was so sad.
That's really nice.
Yeah, I really like. I look forward to when I can get it again because I'm gonna like kind of because it's currently in Georgia with my mom because she's trying to move back to Philly. So she's got all my art pieces from high school. And when I get the chance to see it again, I'm gonna, you know, touch it up because I'm sure it's pretty like dusty. It's been sitting in a closet for what, like 5 years now. So yeah, I just went into like straight tunnel vision, and I was like, I'm gonna focus on my art, making sure my sister's okay, and I'm gonna make sure my grades are okay. And I felt very happy at the end of 11th grade because I got my grades pretty much to like all A's and B's except for my stupid French class because I got a new French teacher and she sucked. um, and then, so when that was happening, I was just trying to stay focused on school, but then senior year came, and when senior year started, I told myself this is gonna be like my year. Like, I'm just gonna try to be happy and take everything in about being a senior. Like, I'm doing all the trips, I'm going to all the school events, I'm going to all the football games. Well, I had to go to all the football games because I was in marching band. Um, but I was more so like, I am just gonna make senior year fun, even though like I really hate going home. So all of that was changed though because that's when COVID happened. So that really was not good for my mental health because I was already dealing with like, you know, being without my own space, and like my whole life was in a storage unit, and I just was like, I didn't know how to tell anyone at school that, and my mom was ashamed of it, so she told me not to tell anyone at school. Like I didn't tell anyone except for my school social worker because, you know, at that point the school had to get involved, and especially because me and my sister were always late, so because it was me taking her to school, and it's like I didn't even want to take myself to school, so of course my sister is late. But yeah, that was just a really bad time for me because like I never felt so empty before with COVID, and it's like I know it hit everybody, but I just was especially like I felt like I was already getting beat when I was down because I was really trying to be like, I'm gonna make senior year fun. I'm gonna go on the senior trip. I'm gonna go on the senior band trip. And then it just felt so like heartbreaking because it just was like canceled. Everything's canceled. Can't do anything.
Were you still homeless when COVID hit?
Yeah. So it just everything was just really like,
So school was your escape.
yeah, like
But then it closed.
yeah. So now I just was like, I just felt so sad because I was like, I don't have anywhere to go. And I just, at the time, I had a boyfriend, and I eventually, like, after talking to my brother, I was like, I don't know what's wrong, but I don't feel this. And he was like, maybe I need to break up with him. And then, like, in hindsight, I now realize, like, I started using him as my escape because he had a car. I was like, let's just go somewhere. I don't want to be here. Let's leave. And I just was like, I wish I could go back in time, like, so bad to just give myself a hug because it's like I just kept getting all these blows. And I just was like, why is this supposed to be fun?
Did you get really depressed in your senior year?
Yes. That was like the most depressed like I have ever been. Like I got to the point where I just was like, I was just taking Benadryl so I could go to sleep because I didn't want to be awake. I didn't want to deal with anything that had to do with me leaving. I gained a lot of weight because I just was like door dashing food because I was like, I don't want to go anywhere, don't want to cook nothing. And I just like discovered melatonin gummies, and my sleep schedule was so bad because what I learned with the melatonin gummies, I could only be asleep for like 3 hours at a time if I took that. So I was just knocking those things back like a handful, and I just would be asleep forever. And I can't believe this is life. Like, I can't believe like the world just like shut down on me. And I just was so like over it. And I just was like, it had been a while since I was feeling like, you know, like I don't want to be here anymore. But those thoughts started to come back, and I just was like, this sucks. Like, I just hate all of this. And so that's kind of when my uncle was like, I don't know if you have any interest in California, but, and I just was like, I don't care. Like, as long as I'm not here, get me to do something that will make me feel less like I don't want to be alive anymore. I'm cool. I'm down because I tried like I've had those moments where I was like, I'm gonna call like my social worker because she was also kind of like my therapist in high school because I was having a lot of mental episodes in 2020 because it just was like it felt like my life was like caving in on me. But I just like once I was done with school, I felt like so much better because the stress of trying to figure out how to make school work in 2020 was too much for me. Like it just felt like I don't want to do this. Like just make it over with. And especially with the whole like are people going to have graduations and prom being canceled? I know prom is very like some people don't care about it, but like I had never really had like a chance to just like, you know, kind of be the center of attention. So I was really looking forward to prom. And my school was like, at first, it was like, we're going to try our best to make sure that you guys still get something. And at first, it was like downsized to just like a little ball in the gym. And then it just was like flat out canceled, and they like refunded everyone. And it just hurt so much. And I just was like, this is so. I have this tendency, I guess it's like my coping mechanism is just like when something is just so unbelievably painful, I just have to laugh because I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like, no way. So everything that happened in 2020, like, was just like, ugh, this blows.
Were you questioning your sexual orientation in high school?
I was because, and in hindsight, like looking back, it makes me wonder, is that why I went through so many like boyfriends or just like people that I dated? Because I just was like, this is nice, but I don't know if I like it. Because I never wanted to be the bad guy and be like, I just don't think I like you anymore. Um, but I just like I don't know. There were some girls in high school that I had like a very like overwhelming attraction to, and I really like them. But I just was like, well,
did you recognize it as something that could be attraction, or did you think it was like a friend crush or something?
I always called it like I would tell people, have you ever had a crush on someone, but you just really want to be their friend, but it's like you really, really like them, but like depending on who I would tell that to, they're just like, girl, no. Like this one girl that came when I was in 11th grade, I think she came from a boarding school, and she just was like so beautiful to me. Like everything about her just was like, how are you real? Like you're so everything is amazing. And on top of her just being like this really beautiful and bubbly person, her artwork was like gorgeous. Like she would come to school with these like huge pieces, and she made like a lot of like political art, you know, like she made this one piece. It was huge. It was probably taller than her. I think it was maybe like 4.5 feet, or it was really big, and it was all these men in cages, and it was representing like the people that were imprisoned in I think Palestine or something like that. And I just was like, I just everything about her, I just was like, every time I saw her I wanted to cry because I was like, you're so, I just want to hold you.
Did you ever tell her that?
I absolutely did not.
Was she queer?
I think she was, but like, I don't know. It's like every time I was around her, I just got like the biggest butterflies in my stomach, and I didn't even know how to talk to her. Like, we went on this art trip one time, and it was, I think someone at the table knew that I liked her because some of the girls were like, okay, we're gonna go to the bathroom, and everyone left except for her. And I just was like, you guys, why? And I just like, I was so nervous. Like, I feel like I was like sweating bullets, even though I don't really sweat, but I was like, I was so nervous. And so I tried to talk to her, and I was like stumbling on the words and stuff, and I was like, ugh. I need this part to fast forward. So awkward. But yeah,
Did having that crush make you want to be at school so that you could see her?
yeah, I was like really excited. Like I would always ask my friend, hey, is she here today? Did you see her? Because I don't know, it's like when I would see her, I feel like I saw a unicorn. I just be like, ah, you're so. And I just like, she just made me so happy. And then I felt so weird when my friend was like, yeah, she's got a boyfriend. I was like, why?
So we were talking about your high school experience and the fact that you started to realize that you were questioning your sexual orientation in high school, right?
Yeah.
Did that, did you know other queer students at your school? Were people out as queer at your school?
Yeah. So my best friend at the time was gay. And so when I was telling him how I felt about the girl, he would always kind of give me the side eye, like, that kind of sounds like, but we kind of just were like brushing it off. Because at the time I had a boyfriend and I just was like, my life was just in shambles. So he just, at that point, he was kind of like my chauffeur. And, but yeah, my best friend at the time was gay. I didn't know any, like, I don't think I knew any, like, lesbians at my school. I think I knew maybe like three, but I wasn't like as close to them. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I maybe didn't act on any of my, like, what do you call them? Like my urges, because I just felt like I just gotta play my part. That's not me. But I was like, in hindsight, I'm like, that kind of was me though.
Do you remember if any of the staff or the faculty, or I mean the teachers were queer?
Mm, yeah, well, wow, that kind of just unlocked like a sad memory a little bit. We did have a queer math teacher, but he unfortunately left because the kids were so mean to him because he was the only teacher that was like out, and he just was like, I don't care. But it kind of sucked because before he came, the only other, like, there weren't even really any queer teachers. It was mostly just like allies. Um, yeah, like before he came, there was nobody, and I felt so sad when I found out that he was leaving because I just was like, guys, we can't have anything nice here. And I just felt so bad because I just was like, I I felt like this is not what I want my school to be. Like I don't want my school to be a place where, it's not welcoming to, you know, teachers that are different than, I guess, what people think is a normal teacher. And this is kind of a tangent, but not really. But um, everything that's been happening in Florida recently and all the laws that have been passed, I mean, well, the bills that have been passed since I've been in high school, it really sucks because I can't imagine like what this teacher felt, to literally be like chased out of a school by just like mean students that are only like, they're a product of wherever they come from. And I really like, I think about him sometimes because I'm like, I wonder like where he went after that, or if he just kind of was like, screw teaching, like this sucks. Um, because like I can't even imagine what the pressure must feel like to be, a queer teacher in the South, because like as we've seen since I've been in high school, like they clearly do not have any support there or enough support to where they can, do their jobs without it being like some kind of agenda or some kind of whatever. But outside of that one math teacher that we had, no.
Remember if any of your classes covered queer topics?
Not really. Outside of maybe like art, not really. Um, I'm trying to think about like maybe my literature classes. I think when I got to 12th grade, when we did British literature, I think we maybe went over like some queer authors and maybe in 11th grade, but my time, like as far as like the curriculum goes in Georgia, it was very like cookie cutter and kind of like, I don't know how else to describe it, just kind of like, I want to say this was like your average like whitewashed teaching of history and American culture. There wasn't too much emphasis on anything outside of just like, like the founding fathers and like Shakespeare and just like the staples of learning, I guess. Anything else was kind of like an extracurricular thing that you kind of have to look for yourself. I think maybe in the theater class there was some teaching of like queer stuff, but I feel like that's kind of like it kind of goes hand in hand.
Was like Black art and history and culture taught?
Barely.
Were the teachers Black?
I had like a pretty, I had like a pretty good mix of like black and white teachers. Um, Most of my science teachers and English teachers were black, and then my math and kind of like all the other stuff was white teachers. And yeah, like we didn't really learn too much about like any black or queer stuff unless it was in art, because my art teacher was like an ally to the GSA club that we had there. So that was only kind of like a safe space to talk about whatever queer things that we were interested in. And the AV room, the that room was like where the GSA club was held. And yeah, that was about it. Like, because my school, I guess their curriculum was just very like traditional and they didn't want to like push any buttons or nothing like that. Because even like having the GSA club, I remember the president of the club was like, yeah, like we have to do a lot to get this club even. And I guess I never really thought about it before, but I'm almost positive that all of this being in Georgia was the reason why.
And so at ARC, you started in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So you were all online
Yeah.
for a while. You went from being online and hating it in high school to college and then having to be online. How was that transition?
Well, um, my senior year, I was only online for a little bit because when COVID happened, it was March of 2020. So I was only online for like a couple months, and it just was kind of like I was in really good academic standing. So my teachers were kind of like, you don't really have to come to class if you don't want to. And so I just was kind of like sleeping. But I didn't really get like my real Zoom experience until I started at ARC. And at first it was pretty fun because I enjoy being at home and like minimal interaction anyway. But I think like halfway through my second year of college, I was like, okay, this is kind of, I don't like this anymore. Mostly because I don't know if you've ever heard of like the switch that kind of happened during the pandemic of like introverted and extroverted people, like they kind of switch positions. Like extroverted folks became more introverted in a way, and then vice versa. So for me, I during this time I was like, when I moved out here, I was really focused on bettering my social skills. And so with that kind of came this like burst of my somewhat extrovertedness in comparison to what I used to be like. And so that online was like so just like not ideal, because I'm sure you've like been in the Zoom class and it's like the professor asks a question and then there's silence. And then I didn't like to feel like this, but I always felt the urge to just be like, I gotta break the silence. Like, I can't do this. So it would basically just be me and the professor having a conversation for an hour. And it just, I don't know, it just felt really weird. It felt like, because I'm used to being relatively closer to my teachers and professors, just because I am very interested in like who they are as people, and I appreciate them teaching me. But it's not the same online. So that was really difficult because it just felt weird to kind of like carry the class, because I was like, well, this isn't how a class should work. It's like there wasn't a lot of active learning going on. It just was kind of like very passive. And then I would have people kind of talking to me and being like, hey, did you get the answers for blah blah blah? And I'm just like, okay, well, you should try in class. It's like, I know it's boring, but we got to make something better. So yeah, like the 2 year mark was when I was like, okay, I don't like this anymore. But thankfully, like that's kind of when ARC went back to the hybrid, or they started the hybrid. So I had like 3 classes online and 1 in person, and then it kind of went to 2 online, 2 in person, and then my last semester is when I did full in person. And I think I'm glad that I was able to kind of have that gradual welcome back into in person learning, because I feel like if I just went back from just like, I don't know, breakfast with the professor to regular learning again, I don't know how that would have gone. I probably would have just like erased all my other classmates out of my mind and just been like, so professor, just give me my textbook and I'll see you next week for the test. Just like, but yeah, that's kind of how that went for me.
So, can you talk some about your experiences taking courses at ARC that either wholly or in part focus on queer and trans topics?
Yeah, so I'm trying to like recall my other classes, because of course I took queer studies. And
You should definitely talk about that too.
yeah, like I loved that class. I don't know if I should say your class. I loved your class. Um but I'm trying to like recall in any of my art history classes, if we focused on any like queer artists. I think maybe in like my modern art history class that we talked about it just a little bit, like in the 80s, and kind of in the pop culture movement, and kind of like how people express themselves there. And I'm trying to think like all my other classes I took. I definitely know like outside of your class, I took a Russian history class, and there was like a brief section of like queerness there a little bit, but it wasn't too like substantial, outside of just being like, Russia is a very traditional place. I don't really, you know. And I did some like outside research on my own for that class, and I did learn a little bit about queer history that way, but it wasn't like a direct like formal teaching of the history. And I'm like trying to think the other classes I took were like math and science. So
So if you had to provide like an overall assessment, would you say that, what would you say about coverage of queer topics in your classes other than the intro to LGBTQ studies class?
I feel like it could definitely be more present because I feel like I've had kind of like the similar experience, especially my art history classes, because those are the most courses that I've taken at my time at AIC. Um, a lot of art outside of like predominant white artists is kind of like glossed over, even though I'm sure like we all know that black and like people of color and like queer people have added so much to art and culture. I think that we had like a very brief section of where we went over like the Harlem Renaissance, and we learned a little bit about some queer artists, but again, it just was kind of like very, very brief and not as in depth about like France and, you know, like Germany. And I just was like, okay, well, we have a lot of rich culture here in this country, but it kind of gets covered up when we're like learning about America because a lot of the attention goes to like things that are like super old or like really recent, and it just kind of feels like it's not very in-depth, everything that happens in the middle. Because I feel like in my art history classes I remember talking about like the ancient Mayans and then like the Native American people and how they kind of contributed to art and culture, but then it's like in the middle when we could be talking about like what kind of art did Native people make when, you know, they were being freaking, you know, pushed out of their land, and, you know, what was that kind of experience like, or, you know, what kind of art was being made, and like what was like the prominent art being made for like African American people, um, you know, when slavery was finished, and like what did that scene look like? You know, there wasn't too much there wasn't just like that much like in-depth speaking about it. Um outside of just like the bigger names that people know, you know, like Langston Hughes and just like so yeah, I definitely think there could have been more.
So you took Introduction to LGBTQ Studies.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to take that class?
So I chose to take that class because my friend that I was talking about earlier, she took that class, I think. I don't think it was with you because you're not the only person that teaches that class, correct? Yeah.
No, I am the only one that's taught it so far, but there's somebody
Oh.
else teaching it. There was somebody else who taught queer literature before, and there's somebody else who's going to teach Intro to LGBTQ Studies this summer and also in the fall. But there's somebody at CRC that teaches it as well. So anyway.
Maybe it could have been the queer literature because she, or maybe she took your women's studies class, and when we were looking at classes together, she was like, "Oh, like queer studies, that sounds interesting." And I was a little hesitant at first because I was like, what if I don't like the class? Or like, in hindsight, I feel like it was because I knew, but like I didn't want to like indulge in like me actually like being intrigued in queer history and culture and stuff. And I guess I just was kind of scared to learn something about myself, which it did. But yeah, I was kind of like recommended the class in a way, and I'm happy that I took it. It was very like, I like when I feel like I had like a substantial class. Yeah.
Is there any other reason why you had hesitation to take the class?
Just because I kind of was feeling like, like I know queer history, like the 80s that happened, and I guess I just was kind of like, mm, how do I word it? Like, it just was kind of being like a know-it-all. I just was like, I know already. What more could I possibly know? And I just was also just being like, didn't want to learn anything about myself that I wasn't ready to accept. But that's pretty much my hesitation for the class.
Why do you think it's important for courses to be offered that either focus on queer and trans topics or um, at least cover queer and trans topics?
I think it's important because it's a history that is not often taught, and it's you know there's so much like other elements combined into it. And I feel like that's the part that I was corrected on when I took the course. Is like, it's not just like, it's not just about gay people. There's so much more to it that people should know. Like, there's the elements of like Native people and kind of like understanding queer history from the perspective of the people that you're learning about, and learning about what it means for like the elders of the community, because there's plenty of elders that are still here with us. And I feel like, I know some people don't like when people compare queer problems to black problems, but I am kind of against that because there's so much overlap there, because there are so many queer black people that experience both of these problems. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I feel like when a lot of people kind of are ignorant to queer history and queer problems, it's, to me, it's kind of the same as if you were just like refusing to learn about the problems of like a minority race or something. And especially like, if our ancestors who were enslaved were still here, we would love to talk to them and like love to know their perspective on everything that happened. And then so many more people would be informed and hopefully understand like, how being black impacts your life. And I feel like if we have more queer studies and history kind of intertwined in the things that we teach people every day in schools, I feel like then hopefully maybe one day people will finally understand, like, these are people's lives. It's not like, it's not whatever you're thinking it is. It's like, these are people's lives and they're impacted by things that are, how do I say it? Like, they're impacted by things that are like, that are just like not, how do I say it? Like, it's like they shouldn't call for like the things that happen to these people, like no one should be harassed or like hurt because of the color of their skin. And no, the same is should be said for people who don't, you know, conform to gender, the gender binary, and don't sleep with who you think they should sleep with. I think it's just very important to help undo a lot of the like deep setted tone that's been set in our country. Like, there's just this idea of how things should be, and I feel like once you learn queer history and kind of like teach yourself to like think critically about what you're learning, then it really helps people to kind of like undo their bias and like unlearn a lot of their like violent and harmful behavior, and especially when it comes to like your language. Like I feel like I don't know, it's like, to me it's the same thing as if we taught more about black history and like, you know, the whole critical race theory. Like I feel like these are the things that are needed to help make a real like change amongst people, because if we don't teach people these people's histories, then you're just going to keep having people that are constantly being judged, and all these like weird moments that could have been avoided had people known, you know, XYZ. And I just feel like having courses with more queer histories and more like what's the word
Topics or experiences or
yeah, like what's the word for curriculum, that having a better curriculum that has more queer and like things that are not necessarily like so narrow. I feel like that is the only way really to kind of get like a good foundational change and help people better themselves, you know? Because, like I said earlier, I don't like to say that everyone is set in their ways, because it really just like, I feel like if you give people the tools to educate themselves, you can only just like hope that they kind of take the bait and, you know, want to educate themselves so that they can be better. But I don't know. I feel like including more queer stuff is how we can get the ball rolling on that.
so what has it meant to you personally to be able to take a class that focuses on intro to LGBTQ studies? What impact has it had on you?
Personally, I feel like it has made me feel like a better ally to the LGBTQ plus community, because I I like grew up as a Christian. I had a lot of beliefs that I no longer believe in, of just like I was very like anti-transgender. I thought it was, I always, it's so cringy that I used to say this, but I would be like, it's a smack in the face to God. And I just would be like, it's so cringy that I used to think that. But I I told myself that I just was going to try and be better and just try and teach other people that like you have to like unlearn the hateful things that are taught to you when you're little, because when you hold on to them, like you just grow up to be miserable. And I feel like I just taking this class helped me be more on track to being who I want to be, which is I just want to be someone who learns to respect everybody, no matter like what may be different between us, because I I just believe that like there should always be a foundational respect of each other as human beings, you know? And I feel like that should always come first, not like whatever you look like, or you know, whatever your other stuff is. I feel like there always needs to be that foundational respect of human beings, and I felt like when I was younger I didn't have that, because I was always taught to see like people's like, I don't know, like they're outside first and just like judge them based off that. And I don't want to be that way anymore, because I feel like it's not fair and it's not right. So I feel like learning about queer history and really like transgender history like really helped me a lot, because it helped me learn more about the things that trans people have been fighting for so long. And it also helped me understand like sometimes like transgender people, like, you're comfortable with it until it's like not the image that you're comfortable with, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of people are only comfortable with transgender people if they look how they're supposed to look, you know? Like, that's kind of where people get like uncomfortable if they see like someone who is feminine presenting, but maybe they got like some different masculine features, then that kind of messes with people's idea of what, you know, a man or a woman is supposed to look like. And I feel like that is something that I just was like struggling to address. Like, what do I see as a man or woman? And I feel like I just have like a better understanding of like to stop seeing people as like, mm, how do I say it? Like, I feel like I gained a better understanding of learning to just truly just be like, that's just a person. Like, they're just existing, they're doing whatever works for them, and just kind of like truly just minding my own business. Because, like, whatever people are presenting as, that has nothing to do with me. And it's like, it's almost like I had to learn how to draw back in some, because I was always taught to be like, if someone is not doing something that is supposed to be the right way to do it, you know, it's like when I was little, I just was taught like, you're supposed to be like, oh, let me help you because you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, that's where you just learn to draw back in and be like, they know what they're doing and that's why they're doing it. It has nothing to do with me. Live your life. You be great.
Taking the class shape your own kind of self-conception at all?
Yeah, I think it helped me feel a little bit more like um, kind of more comfortable with what did I look like, because I struggled a lot with like my body image, especially like being a bigger person, and um, I guess just having like features that are more masculine to some people, like having like bigger shoulders, being like darker skinned or whatever. And I feel like learning about how there are some people out there that truly like just don't care about any of that and just would like to be a free living walking being, like, it makes you feel better, because it's like it helps take off all those pressures of like trying to be feminine or trying to be masculine and whatever the heck to achieve whatever kind of look you're going for. And it just really helps me like be like, I don't have to look like anything or be like anything. And you know, when I was little, I always hear the phrase "that's not ladylike," and I swear, up until maybe like high school, that was like burned into my head. So I would always try to like be all feminine and soft and stuff, and kind of like overcompensating for whatever I felt like I wasn't good enough at. But I feel like the more I learn about like what it means to be like someone who doesn't conform to gender stuff, it just looks so freeing. And I'm like, I like that. Like, even though I feel more comfortable like identifying as a woman. Like, I don't think that I'm non-binary, but just like learning that there are people out there that don't care to conform to being a boy or girl or looking a certain type of way, it makes me feel like I don't have to be like this perfect image of what is expected to be a woman, I guess. So I feel like that's something that I've kind of learned for myself.
Did you find community in the class at all?
I feel like, yeah, because I got lucky with it being a smaller class. So it definitely felt very like comfortable in there to talk about kind of whatever, and like whatever you learned that week. And I think that I enjoyed not feeling uncomfortable to share like my faults in what I was thinking or what I thought previously. Because I just felt like a safe space to share whatever. Because I feel like I have these thoughts of like just shame, just like I can't believe I thought those things, and it's like it's hard to address it out loud and like be like, yeah, I did that. But it's nice that class. It was nice to have a community of like. It sucks that you did that, but it's good that you're trying to change and like trying to inform yourself so that you can be better. I feel like that was a nice thing to have in the class.
So if you could learn anything else related to queer and trans studies, history, whatever, what would you like to learn more about?
I feel like I would like to be. Um, I'm interested in learning a lot about like transgender related content because I feel like it's just such a big topic right now politically and stuff, and I want to be able to inform people and like correct people because a lot of people back home in Philly are very like just very ill informed or unfortunately like consuming a lot of misinformation, and I just feel like I want to be a better ally to the trans community, so I want to just kind of like shut down any kind of incorrect thinking because I just feel like it's just not fair to like demonize this whole group of people because of this one little like TikTok you saw or something like that. Or I also, since I've been working with kids the past couple of years, I I have met more out children or children that are not gender conforming, and it really helped me have like a change of heart because I had a lot of people saying like um, they don't believe that children should be able to make these decisions, and they don't believe that it's fair, and just like all the negative things. And it just sucks because I feel like I can only speak so much on behalf of children because I'm not a child, and I feel like people just don't respect that kids know when they know, you know, and that is something that I also am like just really interested in being an ally for. So I'm all interested in learning about transgender studies, like especially like more modern stuff. Even though I've seen that it's a little bit difficult because um like there's like active studies taking places, so all the answers probably aren't there, but um I just want to know more so I can kind of correct behavior when I see it a little bit because I just feel called to do that. But that is what I am interested in.
So you said that the curriculum at your high school felt like not that inclusive, it felt more traditional. How has that compared? And I think you used the phrase whitewashed.
Yeah.
So how has that compared to your experience at ARC?
I feel like hmm, I'm I'm like scanning all of my classes that I took so I can really think about it.
I mean, do you think the Black experience has been covered in some depth in your other classes, or in the Intro to LGBTQ Studies class? Do you feel like it's been like the African American experience has been centered as much as it should be?
Honestly, I feel like outside of I'm not sure what to label these classes, but like my classes that are more kind of they are centered around like social things. Outside of that, not really. Like, because I took a sociology class that was specifically focused on race ethnicity and equity or something like that. And I really enjoyed that class because not only was like the Black experience highlighted, like the experience as like a Mexican American or like an Asian American, like all of these things were highlighted. But then, if I go to my art history class, we're not learning about anything except for like white European artists and, white American artists. And so then it's like, it almost feels like any kind of Black or just not white person is almost like sprinkled in last minute as like, oh yeah, let me add in this so it doesn't look so white. But it's like, that's not how it works. In my modern art history class, I was expecting a little bit more coverage of Black artists, but I think I mentioned it earlier. It's like we went over like the Harlem Renaissance and a couple of artists from like the early to mid 2010s, like the artist, I can't remember his name, but he painted the presidential portrait of Obama.
Hindi Wiley.
Yeah, we talked about him a little bit, and like this other artist from like the late 90s. She was like a quilt artist, and
Faith Ringel.
Yeah, that's about it. And I just felt like it was very sprinkled in last minute. And I kind of didn't like that because I felt like there's just so much more that could be talked about. And I don't know if like the professor that taught that class maybe was like teaching a outdated curriculum or something, but I feel like there's so much more that could be taught.
Was there a textbook that was used?
Yeah. It was I don't remember.
It's okay if you can't remember the title.
I remember the title. It was like Gardner's Arts Through the Ages or something like that. And it was like the 8th and the 9th edition. But
good memory.
But I don't know, it felt like everything was so focused on like just like European art. And it sucks because like a lot of the history that is regarding art is European based. Like they didn't really like highlight anything else outside of maybe like Middle Eastern art because like what is it called? Like Central Asia? Is that the same place?
Like Afghanistan, that area? Yeah,
like they contributed a lot to art and science, but as far as like Africa, like places in India, some of Japan, mostly like Japan and like China, but yeah, like Africa is always just kind of like glossed over, and it kind of sucks because there's just so much that is just kind of like it's just missing. So
I feel like I have a million questions. I can just keep asking them. But where did you find community at ARC?
For me, I found community in the Umoja group. Because I don't know, I didn't really start college expecting to make friends. Because my brain kind of did like a hard reset again where I was like, okay, I'm starting a new school, blank state. I will just make friends with whoever comes my way. But I got added to the Umoja group on campus and I was like, I don't know what this is. But they invited me to like, I think they have like village time or something like that. And it was virtual. And then I started going to the in-person virtual village and I kind of made like some cool friends in the Emoji Center through like visiting the library on campus, and the librarians helped too. I really appreciate the librarians. And outside of that, I would say maybe like my sociology class. I really loved that class, and I talked to like some people outside of it, and um I also kind of I found community in like the home bases, and I thought that that was I thought it was funny because they didn't exist before, and I was kind of there in their creation, and I was always at the arts home base and the business home base, and those are kind of my two. Well, those were my two places where I felt like comfortable, and so when the campus opened back up, I just kind of hung around in the, what do you call it, the Unite Center. That's what it's called. I really liked it in there because it just felt nice to just kind of talk to whoever was in there.
So, how important do you think community is for your sense of well being at the college? And also, just sort of like your sense of belonging and inclusion?
So if you asked me that question like a year ago, I would have not had an answer for you because I was so used to just not really having a community outside of just like my family at home. But ever since I started college, I've realized like community is really important because it helps you keep going. Like it really helps you to enjoy your experience there. And like I know some people like school just is not for them and they don't really like the school environment, but for me personally, I love learning. I eat knowledge up. Like I literally, some people like to watch movies. I am always watching some kind of documentary, always like watching some kind of essay about something. And I feel like when you are surrounded by people who want to succeed for themselves, it helps you to keep that momentum going of like, okay, I started school, so I'm gonna finish it. And I feel like it makes like graduating or like earning whatever you earn, it just makes it so much more satisfying because like you finished with all these people who are here to support you and they just want to see you do better. Like if I didn't actually like become active in Umoja, I probably would have been like less happy about graduating from community college because like I was already a little bit like I think I just am honestly traumatized from COVID. Um, and kind of like COVID taking away the joy of graduating. But if I did not have like the community of like the home bases and like Umoja to kind of help me like build back up that excitement because it's a big accomplishment and it just feels nice to have people there that are just like wanting to see you happy because it's like it took me a long time to realize this, but it's like nobody can make you want happiness for yourself, but people sure can try. Like, people can just like having a community around you can help you want better things for yourself. So I think that it's very important to try and find some kind of community.
Is queer community something that you seek out?
I I feel like weird about it because I feel like I am what's the word? Like I'm indirectly seeking it out because I think this kind of like stems back to like queerness in the black community and how it's kind of like an unspoken like we accept it but we don't talk about it. So it's like I feel like I get a little bit like thrown off when um I'm in like a openly like queer space because I'm not used to being like in an environment where it's like loud queerness. It's more so just like contained queerness. It's
Like
like
your friend is queer and you chat about being queer or something. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I've never been the person to kind of like make noise about it. So I guess it feels a little bit like intimidating a little bit to go into that space and like be like openly loud about it because I just am used to kind of being like on the low, but not in like a trying to hide it way. Just very like this is just who I am as a being, and I don't. It's almost like if I was searching for like a people with two ears community, you know, it's like that's just we just have that most of the time.
Does queerness ever come up in Umoja?
It does. Like, I feel like we've had some queer students, but I think it just kind of varies at whatever school you're at. Like whatever school has the Umoja program, because when I went to the Umoja conference in Anaheim, there was definitely a lot of queer people, and it was very nice, and it felt very safe there. Like it felt like a nice, it just felt nice to be there, and I really liked it.
Um, okay, so maybe I'll try and wrap it up because I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to try and wrap it up. But so when you think about your future, I guess, what makes you excited? What are you most excited about?
I honestly, it's so funny you asked me this because I was kind of like just thinking about it the other day because I just was like, I'm really looking forward to like the day that I wake up and I feel like I know who I am as a person because I feel like I have this like lingering discomfort and I feel like it's probably because I really am just questioning everything about myself at this stage and I really cannot wait until I wake up and I'm like, yes, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. I think it's also because like I do have pretty like I don't want to say bad, but I'm a very anxious person. So I guess the thought of like not really knowing who I am right now kind of just bothers me, and I'm excited to see where my future takes me because I know that I want to do a lot of good things and I'm like a helper first. I love to help people and I'm just like excited to see wherever my jumble of like creating and helping and trying to educate wherever that takes me in life because I hope that it helps me find some kind of like I know there's never like a secure version of yourself like you're always changing and building on your past self, but I'm just excited to see like what will I look like at like 30 or something or because I just feel like my past has been so just all over the place. So I'm just like looking forward to that moment when I'm like a little bit older where I can be like, not bad.
Okay, I guess the last question is just the very general question. Anything else you'd like to add or questions you'd like to return to?
I'm never good at this question. This is the hardest question yet. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.